Hi, welcome, and welcome to Outgaze Film Festival. We're honored and thrilled that you've joined us for Outgaze Film Festival, a virtual look at embodiment, inclusivity, and resilience. A festival featuring 14 films from local and international filmmakers and 4 virtual events. Outgaze Film Festival is our offering in this moment of resistance. Outgaze is a collaboration of directors, filmmakers, and film enthusiasts. We're also voters, and we encourage you to get a plan for November 3rd and vote. My name is Amy Irvin, co-director of Outgaze Film Festival. I'm excited to welcome you to this inaugural Feminist Film Festival and our first film panel discussion, Vision and the Body in Queer Feminist Cinema, featuring filmmaker Susan Uravinan, director of Leakage, and Lucia Honey, director of The Bottom, a noise opera. Today, we're also joined by co-director and programmer Amanda Sanfilippo and programmer Meryl Merman. Meryl Merman is a choreographer, filmmaker, and curator. Her queer films and choreographies derived from experiments at the intersection of cinema and dance disrupt popular notions of spectacle, the body, virtuosity, and gender. Amanda Sanfilippo is a longtime performance and visual artist, as well as a birth doula and educator. She teaches adult sex education at the Borberg Theater School in New Orleans. A special shout out to Chris Hammersley, Outgaze's talented tech and operations guy working behind the scenes. Outgaze Film Festival is produced by Creative Community League, a project of Amanda Sanfilippo and myself, Amy Irvin. The festival is also sponsored by Feminist Majority Foundation, New Orleans Film Society, WHIV-FM New Orleans, and Zeitgeist Theater and Lounge. Films Leakage and The Bottom, a noise opera, 2 films that unveil the mystery, humor, pain, and pleasure of human desire, are included in the Visions in the Dark film block. Please view these and all our offerings through October 31st. Before we begin the conversation, I want to give a heartfelt welcome to acclaimed director and actress Marianna Paulka, our moderator for this film discussion.
Hi guys, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I love cinema.
Hey, thank you for joining us so much. Recently named on IndieWire's list of the 20 rising female filmmakers you need to know, Marianna Popka has earned critical acclaim from the Los Angeles Times and New York Times, as well as numerous accolades for her films, including Good Dick, The Lion's Mouth Opens, and Egg. She has gained prestige for her roles in Mississippi Requiem, Good Omens, Girls, and the Emmy-winning Netflix original Glow.
Yes,
We're honored to have her join the festival for this panel discussion, Vision and the Body in Queer Feminist Cinema. Thank you and welcome, Marianna Paulka.
I'm so happy. I really am so happy to be here. And I feel all of those experiences have led me to this day to do this panel.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. And as we were discussing a little bit before joining everyone, there's nothing better to do on a Saturday afternoon in the US as watch a film and listen to a panel discussion. So if you're not out there early voting, we hope you're joining us here at Outgaze. I think we're going to be joined shortly by our panelists.
Mm-hmm. And they're so amazing. Everyone's amazing. And I was watching the films and the films are so good. So we have to talk about it.
Yeah, there's lots to talk about. There they are.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Marianna and Amy.
Hello.
Hi, Susan.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Oh my God. All these amazing people in one place.
So amazing. You guys made such beautiful movies.
Yeah.
I'm glad I was able to watch Leakage last night.
Yay.
Yeah, that is so cool. You guys watched each other's movies. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
It's really good. You know,
And I was watching all your, Marianna, I was watching all your interviews in the past few days, and they were amazing, really. Yeah.
Hey,
and,
thank you.
Your documentary, I mean, I'm going to message you later.
Yeah, we're all going to my mom's house after this.
Lovely.
Yeah. But I do think that my films and your guys' movies are actually the same thing. I was really moved because I felt like if I was in your bodies, having your life experiences, I would have made the films that you guys made. And I think that's unique. I don't think people make the kind of films that we're making. And I think people need to make more of the films that you guys have made, because it heals the world and it helps the world. Specifically in America today, it's very, very, very important. And around the world, obviously, I think it's important to be doing what I kind of see as political activist cinema, which obviously you guys did.
Great.
It's just superb. I'm really honored to meet you guys.
I'm honored to meet you too. Or everyone.
Everyone!
Lucia, I just want to say, I think I met you. You had a wig sale a couple years
Yes.
ago, and I came with Aaron, and I got some really fabulous wigs. So
I remember it, yeah. Yeah, that was last year, right before Mardi Gras.
exactly.
I
But
was trying to de-hoard my life. So.
you did a good job. But I love the wigs that you had in the film too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we're all jealous of those wigs.
You can borrow them. I'll send them in the mail.
Did you guys have the instinct to do what you're doing from childhood? Were you always going to be filmmakers? How did it start for you guys?
Me, I started with, I mean, from my childhood, I don't really remember that, but I started with architecture. I mean, I studied architecture, but then everything, has changed when I decided to study cinema suddenly. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I've been an artist since I was very young, but it's more like two-dimensional visual art, being like a painter. And then I got into sculpture from there, and then performance, and then I went to school for performance, and that's where I got into doing more video work, because there's just another way to document that stuff. And then moving here, I got into music, and that brought me to making kind of like abstract music videos and things along that nature. But I would like to in the future make a feature-length film. It's just, yeah, I haven't done that yet.
Yeah, you definitely are a feature director. For the power of your short, it's like could be expanded as well into feature.
Cool. That's nice to hear. Yeah, I would love to do something along those lines.
I'm very much an avid lover of what cinema means for the people, and the people who are watching, we're so happy. Whoever's watching, we're very excited that you're here, and the idea that people can ask you questions is so fun. So it's just going to be such an amazing moment. But I was wondering as well, because I think that with the female gaze specifically, I don't think you have to be a woman or born a woman to do the female gaze. I think that Almodovar's been doing the female gaze in cinema better than any of us. Like, I really feel like Almodovar's a better female filmmaker than I am. And I think every country has their Almodovar, and then every country has their other people who are making film that is as good as the films that you guys made. But do you think that your countries of birth decided for you a little bit the kind of movies you were going to make, or do you feel like you are speaking to it more than it's being like a reaction to the places you grew up?
Yeah, I guess for me, it's somewhat a reaction to like where I grew up, and then what that is in comparison to any place that I've traveled to.
Wow.
Like traveling to Latin America or traveling to Europe, or once when I was 15, I went to Japan, which is probably the furthest I've been from home. But I think any sort of travel has seriously influenced the type of work I make, and then informs, the type of the landscapes that appear in my videos, which are kind of a response to what I see when I'm there. And I'm a huge Almodovar fan. All through quarantine, I've kind of been on a marathon with my partner watching Almodovar films.
Can we talk about it? I mean,
yeah.
Even cinema, I'm like, that's next level cinema.
I love
Almodovar's
it.
on another level. Tie me up, tie me down. Almodovar's film is just exquisite. It has the best sex scene, if we're allowed to say sex scene at 12 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon in America.
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, the sex scene. Everyone
Anytime,
check out the sex scene in
anytime.
all of our movies.
Yeah, every day, all the time.
Just very cinematic, and filled with
Yeah.
eroticism. I think there's so much space for eroticism and how far to go with that. It's beautiful to.
Yeah, and this kind of like elegant camp. Like it takes it a little bit beyond what camp is typically, and there's like elegance to it that I really appreciate.
It's exquisite. It's exquisite.
Awesome.
What about you, Susan? Do you feel like where you grew up is part of who you are as a filmmaker?
I think, I was born in Iran, and I grew up in a culture of culture of excess, and it comes always with that kind of absurdity as well. And actually, it's a kind of, I can say, it's a clashes of forces. No, like a multi-layer forces, in the history of the region that really made me, so it's like religious backgrounds, all the superstitions and everything, and fear of male and anxiety of living with the foreigners. These are all the things that I think the history of, the landscape, the history of the territory that I live in, I think really affected what I reflected on this film. Yeah.
That's so cool. Do you feel like the history of Iranian cinema also has something to do with what you're doing? Do you think you would have made the same film if you hadn't seen those movies, or do you think the opposite is true?
Yes. I think the history of the Iranian cinema also, and also the laws and the rules. I think they are, which are always in your mind. When I was writing my script, my dad was encouraging me to use a male protagonist, because it was much easier to
shot to the heart, Dad. Shot to the heart there.
Yeah. Because it was easier to show a man urinating oil. So at least I could shoot him from behind, But I couldn't persuade myself. I wanted to be a female character. That's why, So it's
we
really
need more
related.
of the female characters. And did your dad watch it now? And did he feel like he's seen what he can from your interpretation of what cinema is to you?
What's that?
Did he watch your movie and have a reaction to it?
Yeah, he watched it, and he still thinks that the protagonist should be the male character, because he thought that I should have shown more of oil, coming out of body. And I didn't want to show that, I will tell you later why.
Yeah, it makes sense. I know why, That's so incredible. I want to get you a hat that I have. It's a cap. It's like a baseball cap, and just on the top of it, it says "Daddy, please." And I give it to like every friend I have, like everyone I know. I give them the "Daddy, please" hat, because it's like, Daddy, like seriously, please.
It's loaded.
Yes, it's like it's everything. That hat is everything. And also, it's funny to me, like if we give you the "Daddy, please" hat, then we can maybe even put it in his language, and then also he could wear it himself, and that would be very, very deep. But I love that as a message. And I do think that the film's so powerful, and it's got a lot of cinematic truth to it, in the sense of its way that it's crafted and how elegant it is on a cinematic field. Like it really kind of works in terms of the way that it's so constructed in this high-end reality. And are you feeling like, as a filmmaker, you want to do more films there or here, or like, where do you want to do the rest of your career as you're figuring it out? Do you have a wish list of places you want to make movies?
I myself, I really think that it really depends on the content of the scenario, the next scenario that I'm going to write. I mean,
Sure.
it really depends on that. I mean, even the structure of the narrative that I used for Leakage, I think it's somehow a kind of incoherent one, but maybe based on the subject matter, I think it really depends on that.
Yeah, because I think a non-linear narrative is very important to what you guys are doing. And I could cry about why we need more non-linear narratives. I really think that there's a difference between the male orgasm traditional version of a story structure, where it's like one climax and then an ending. It's different than a number of climaxes and maybe no beginning, no end, and it just goes on forever. Like the female orgasm doesn't ever end. Like we're just constantly having an orgasm for the rest of our lives. And that's reflected, I think, in the male gaze versus the female gaze of cinema, regardless of whether or not it's like non-linear or linear narrative. I like to see things in that way, kind of psychologically, what's happening for the filmmaker and why they make the film that they've made. And I think that the more people can watch and be inspired by your movies into the future, that's going to be so interesting what you guys do, because I'm going to be watching it all. It's going to be crazy. Like, you guys are taking on the world, and I really appreciate it. Does it feel like that when you get out of bed in the morning, or you're like, wow, we're superhero filmmakers? And
No, not quite.
No.
But I feel like I'm on a path to go towards the things I meant to do in life. And it's been like a weird long battle and struggle to get to feel that way, but it's starting to happen in some sense. And it's a weird time for that to start to happen too in the world. Like a very complicated moment to feel that.
Particularly in this country, because it feels like the oppression and repression that always happens to artists is happening on a level that's kind of unprecedented, to put a ridiculous word on it. But I think what ends up happening in those situations is the artists squeeze out of that oppression and make work that maybe they might not have made in a time where they were being revered and financed by the government, for example.
Where you have to adhere to like the regime of whatever government organization.
I know. Well, because I always talked about my mom. My mom is she's the reason why I'm a filmmaker. She's an artist. She's a poet, and she made a lot of anti-communist work in Poland. As I was growing up, I was in Scotland, so we also came from a place of understanding culture from that place of how the artist can change the government. And it worked in Poland. It really worked. We saw the overthrowing of the communist regime, and it was really special. And I feel like that's happening here. And I think it's happening in Iran. I think it's happening around the world. I think it's happening in Belarus too. And I think that artists have to keep going, and we have to keep talking to each other and reminding each other with sweetness that this is the best job in the whole world. And that it's really important for the kids who are watching, who are out there watching your movies, to see that they have someone who understands them and someone who loves them, and that they can go into the future and make something that we haven't been maybe able to make yet. That's sort of the point, I think, of being an artist, is we have the little kids in the artist world who come in and they're younger. Like you guys. Because I'm like the granny of cinema over here.
No.
You guys are like my grandchildren, okay? Is that cool if I just adopt you guys? Like now I'm your grandmother. Like that's it, you're part of the family. That means you really do have to go to my mom's house, because you have to see your great grandmother. I think that when I was growing up, there were two kinds of films when I was young. It was really just a good film or a bad film. And it was really specific. And I think that you guys fall into the good movies category. So you really have to keep making films for the rest of your life. I'm not joking.
Okay.
Yes.
We need it. We need it. We need it. We need it. We need it so much. Also, I'm kind of thinking about how to get us into the White House and have a screening of your movies. Maybe in the Blue Room in the White House. Would you guys get dressed up for that and be into that? If I can make that work, because I can text a couple people and see.
Depends who's in the White House.
I know!
Yeah. Yeah, it really
That would be
depends.
so controversial in a wonderful way.
It's like the pressure of that is like such a thing that we're feeling. It's like a little group therapy session we're having here, you know?
Yeah.
Very intense. And what the
Very
vote
intense
means is, yeah, it's a very intense moment. What the vote means for us as citizens in a world. Oh my goodness, this is so exciting because we have a question. Should we ask the question? Should we open up to a question right now because we have one? So it says, how difficult was it to curate and make choices for the festival? Did you have a checklist of sorts or like more your instincts? That's a question for Meryl. Good question. Yeah, like, are you going on instincts?
Yeah, I think some of it definitely is intuition, but we did have some things that we were looking for that I think both of these films really display, which have already come up a little bit in the conversation. A sense of intuition within the filmmaking itself. Both of these films rely on metaphor and kind of poetic language, a sensual body as a driving force in the filmmaking, and these sort of ideas of poetic language or metaphor, the body, are storytelling devices that we don't always see in more linear, plot-driven, dialogue-driven movies that are more kind of male-centered, climax structure, get us to a place kind of filmmaking. I think the strength in particularly these two films is that they allow us to sit with the unknown and the kind of the mystery and the esoteric nature of that is maybe a more misunderstood but important feminist and queer aspect to the queer or feminist experience, I guess.
I think
So
also,
Yeah, Amanda programmed with me, so.
I think also there's this sense of hopelessness in both of the films, and but it's met with this like dark humor and this bravery in the dark humor, and that so much. I can speak from my experience as being born into a female body, is that we find these veils to express our struggles. And one of them is humor and display of our sensuality in these veiled ways, but also what you did in the film was brave in and of itself, of expressing your beauty and dilemmas and all of this through humor and through really explicit sensual visual cinema. And I think that both of the films had that. Just in curating this block, it was beautiful to see how they related in that way. And that they both illuminate this unspoken, and in that way they're transgressive, which I think Marianna, you speak to, is that they are political just by being transgressive in these expressions. Sorry.
It's my mom calling you. She's like, are you guys doing it? We're like, we're doing it.
That's actually my daughter calling her mom. So, I feel very lucky that I got to experience them, and that Meryl and I have also this, the performative aspect of the Bottom of Noise opera was so wonderful. And then the dark fluid coming out of a woman's body as being both a resource and also a pollutant, and also sticky and intriguing, and has so many elements to it. So I think that this bravery and humor was really another aspect that we chose these two together.
They're so good together, aren't they? Like, they're so good together.
Yeah.
It's a really good choice. When you guys were working, do you have a shorthand when you're watching stuff? Do you feel like you're the same brain, or you have different opinions? How does it work?
It's very fluid between Amanda and I. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very
circular
fun.
conversation in a very sense.
Do you feel like you
Yeah.
programmed based off of the year that we're in and what's happening in this year, or do you think this would have happened regardless of the outside forces? And we all know what the outside forces are.
That's a really good question. I think that we didn't have a choice, that we are just in this time and they spoke to this time at this moment. So I can't say, honestly, from my perspective. I feel like they were here now. And I feel that's, I mean, no matter when I watch these films, I feel like they'll be timeless in their relevancy.
Yeah.
They
That's
really
how
are.
I feel too, that there's a timelessness to these two films in some ways because of that mystery, that they're pointing us back to a feminine energy that is like not trying to get us somewhere, but allowing us to sit with the unknown and revel in kind of the secrets and the shadows of existence. And so in that regard, they're always going to be transgressive and timeless, I think.
Yeah, they're timeless, and also they're timely. Like, I do feel like the immigration aspect, where there's these layers of immigration conversation in your film, Susan, and then in Lucia, your film about the telephone. Like, where's my phone? Like, you know, and this like constant looking in the mirror. Like, I don't see anything. I'm just looking in this mirror. And I think those are pointed about our time in history and about what's going on in the realms of interpersonal and political aspects and geopolitical, really.
Yeah, you guys put that so well. And the idea that the films each are alchemy, you know, I mean, they're so fun in the darkness. And so therefore it's quite interesting that you guys have made something that will stand the test of time and show future generations what it felt like to be around this year and how we feel about it. Specifically, when you were making it, was it funny? Like, was it fun on set, and were you guys like laughing?
At moments. So for the scenes filmed in Las Vegas, I was literally drunk to film it, and so that was definitely an experience, and like blackout at moments.
That's cool. You're like, I don't remember half of it, so that's funny.
But it's on camera, which makes that really interesting.
That's all that matters. That's all that matters.
But yeah, and the other moments were filmed in a really different way that were more controlled, and like we had a very specific vision of like shots and stuff. It was some free flow. But yeah, I always try to have fun. Fun.
That's cool. Was it funny
for
you,
me,
Susan?
I think, yeah. I mean, funny. I mean, it was.
You're like, it was a laugh. It was a laugh
me.
a minute. Yeah.
You know why? Because, I mean, the city that I live in is Shiraz, is located south of Iran, and it is not a hub for filmmaking. Tehran is actually a hub for filmmaking, and you know, you can find equipment, you know, the professional crew, and you know, everything that you need is actually there. I remember, let me tell you my story of Mariel, actually. I remember once I came to New Orleans, and it was, I came to this bar, and I remember Mariel was dancing, and you know, my cousin, he told me that she's a choreographer, and she's very professional, and she's very talented, and she can help you. I'm talking about 5 years ago, yeah, and she can help you to find, you know, a cinematographer. Imagine, I was in the US and I was looking for a cinematographer. So I asked Mariel if you can help me, and she introduced a guy from, a very talented guy from Lebanon. So he came from the US to Iran, and he helped me shoot my film. So it was kind of difficult because getting visa was complicated, and you know, the equipment, we had to be very creative. on
Did
the
you
set
get an
because
O1
we don't.
visa? Is that how that worked out?
Sorry, what's that?
Did you get an O1 visa? Is that how you got the visa? Was it an O1 or did you get a different visa?
Yeah, yes. I mean, the thing was that he gained a tourist visa, but because he couldn't get a working visa or anything like that.
Yeah.
So he came with tourist visa, and then he extended it. He went back to Lebanon again, and he extended it for another month. So it was kind of complicated. And the equipment and like all the people in the film that you say, they are friends and family, and no one is really professional except my protagonist, who has some little background in theater, but she's really, I mean, not professional. So
that's amazing. That's amazing.
Everything is I mean even like all the equipments, I mean everything comes from our friends and family, and
that was so cool. It takes a village to make it all happen.
Yeah.
We also have another question that's for Susan that says, powerful. This film unfolds in a feminine sense of time. How did you as a filmmaker tap into that feminine sense of time? It's a little bit what we're talking about the story structure.
Yeah. I mean, is it really a feminine film?
I don't know that it has to be, but the idea that the structure isn't necessarily like, the way that other movies are structured.
Yeah, but I think because there is this kind of dualistic conceptualization of body.
The dualism is really powerful.
Exactly. I mean, because the family that are introduced in the film is somehow they rigidly stick to the cliche portrait of women, represented by kind of the reproductive organs, so I think it is very difficult for them to kind of think bodies outside the bound which have been constituted. So that's why maybe, I mean, there's always this woman, man, masculine, feminine, this thing is going on, and you always think that maybe it's a feminine film, but I don't feel like that. I mean, it's like they don't have that much knowledge about female body. I mean, I remember Meryl once said something about lack of knowledge that is in one scene, the one particular scene in this film. I mean, in this particular scene, there's a conversation about, when Jolly and Leila, they're looking at this report of ultrasound tests, and they cannot realize a kidney from a bladder. So that lack of knowledge, I think, gives you the sense of that's dualistic conceptualization of body, that there's always female, male, man, woman, and masculinity, femininity. Yeah.
That's
also in the bladder, they were like, don't say urinate, it's not proper.
Yeah.
And that was
I think, this shielding language is also it comes from, as I said before, it's like the history of me. It's like is caused by different multi-layered forces, like, as I said, superstitious, the religious things, like fear of male and everything, that's why, and it's really strange because they don't want to say the word urine in front of the maid, but at the same time, they're openly talk about oil, which they both come from one place. I mean, but they openly talk about oil, but it is because of their traditional things, you know, like the thoughts, you know, like, yeah.
And those traditional systems that are really passed down ancestrally. So fascinating, that idea that in your films, do you feel like you guys have been influenced by the storytellers in your own family from back in the day, whether or not they were generations above you who were or were not able to tell their stories on a creative level? Do you feel like that's something that influenced you personally as filmmakers?
I'd say personally, I don't know if I know much of the history of my family in that sense, or like if anyone had a story that they felt like they weren't able to tell. But I could think of that more in like terms of identity or something, or like ancestors in a different sense, like in terms of queerness or
like the society that wasn't allowed to be in all the generations before. That's gonna make me cry exactly. Now as I'm talking. I don't know. It's really kind of like the whole like history of humanity is your family. I'm like, oh my god. Like, that's the thing that makes me cry.
Sorry,
really awesome.
Tears to it.
No, it's beautiful cinema tears. That's amazing. That's
or
really
just like trying to capture a nuanced identity that is maybe not typically seen in media or something, and that's also hard to describe and hard to categorize because it's ambiguous. You're like just like being gender ambiguous in some sense, not adhering to one or the other, or right, being like medically so trans versus non-binary or something. But yeah, there's lots of directions. But not sure, like in terms of my own like blood family, I don't know. I just don't know the story that well. You know? They weren't storytellers.
They were not storytellers. The people in your like your grandparents and all the people like before them weren't necessarily doing that.
No, and I don't know that much about their lives. I feel like they didn't tell stories very often, and that's something that's like maybe different than other friends' grandparents that I've seen. But,
that's cool.
Yeah.
There's a question for you too, which is what are the ways in which you're breaking down the mainstream notions of virtuosity? Well, cinematic, musical, gender-specific ideas of virtuosic aesthetic. It's a little bit in line with what we were just saying.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, like, as the filmmaker, I don't know if I would call my film virtuosic.
Sure.
Like, that's up to a viewer, like, someone else's opinion of what it does. It felt cathartic for me to do, and I like, needed to express it. But I'll say that, yeah, I had fun playing around with like the typical notions of what a narrative are, or like a film, or also playing around with the idea of a visual album, because that's another way I frame this project.
A visual album, wow, that's gorgeous, yeah.
And it's weird because it's not a whole album, and it's actually songs from 2 different albums that I was like in between at the time. So it's like a bridge between those, but trying to form, a very abstract narrative through telling an abstract story, and then using some like pop imagery in there, but doing it in my own very weird way. And to have the story be kind of an unraveling instead of a build to a climax, it's kind of just like deteriorates in the beginning and it keeps going from there. It takes you to strange places.
We love that. It should always take us to those strange places. We need it.
That's where I want to be.
Cool that you're doing that. It's very curious and open-minded of your own self as a filmmaker that you have the capacity for that. It's very good and helpful to the world on a real way. So that's how people can interpret it for themselves, because you're doing it so well for you. So
and part of it is just like that's how I think. Like I don't think in like a very typical narrative way.
That's just like, innate.
Life seems cyclical to me. I think if I try to tell a narrative story, which I've tried to do multiple times, it just comes out this way. And
you're like, this is me trying to be narrative.
Yeah,
like I am. Like totally, this is it. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I've taken on the task of starting to write a book, and I'm like facing this task right now, and it's just bringing out different things. It's a very interesting process, but that's a little outside of filmmaking.
That's cool. Yeah, no, I could write like a children's book, but that's it. I can't do anything else. I wouldn't be able to do a book. I'm too like visual in the cinema realm, and that's all I'm built for in a weird way. But yeah, it's gorgeous. What about you, Susan? Do you feel like the ancestors and like the other people in your family before you had anything to do with you as a filmmaker with this
with
film
storytelling?
Yeah, did you feel like you were they were helping you at all?
Not my family, but no, not my family. But there's something. I mean, like in a time when I was at high school, there's always a circle of friends, but there's always one or two friends at that age, who has, have some kind of weird things, coming of age, things about adulthood, that they tell you about those things. So once there was this girl who came to us and told us that, okay, guys, you all get your period, and when you get your period, you all bleed, okay? And say, okay. And then she said, but when I get my period, something else comes out of my body. No way. At that moment, yeah, that was a really weird thing. That's really, I mean, I was always thinking about her and her body and what could that substance be? I mean, but she was kind of, I don't know why she told us that story. And she's now a very normal person. She's working in a bank right now. And when I see her, it's amazing when I see her. And, I filling out the forms and looking at her and thinking about, her body. But yeah, that was actually the inspiration for, I mean, the story behind what I, had written. Really.
That's amazing.
That is amazing.
I feel like in both of the films, that embodiment aspect is so profound, and that's what shifts the sense of time for me anyway, was like this deep embodiment and this non-linear, or this cyclical, like what you were saying, Lucia, is this cyclical thing. And then with the menstruation and the fact that you used a woman that was past her menstrual time, but then goes back into the cyclical sense of resourcing is really unusual in cinema. To have that being have power and have focus and have mystery is a really unusual experience. And that also, like, I watched it last night with a bunch of queer radical fairies, and they all came up this morning. I've been camping out in nature for a month now, sleeping under the stars, and this morning we came together, and the number of questions around how did that work, how did the time work, wait, what was that reference, or the layers and layers of meaning in there that came forth, also broke down time. Right? It broke down into these mythologies. And I think that's also happened in a bottom too, the bottom of Noise Opera, where there was all these like, what's happening? Why are we on Lake Pontchartrain in a rubber ducky right now? Like, anyway, so.
I think there's always, as Meryl mentioned before, there's always this kind of concept of disruption that's happening in leakage, and this notion of disruption, I think, is happens really when the protagonist leaks oil, but most of the time it acts as some sort of twist in different parts of the narrative, without leaving any trace. I mean, when let me put it in this way: when you write about, when you write a story, this disruption in the narrative, I think, can act as a line of departure for characters' development and rendering story and bringing in new adventures. But the continuation of the narrative, I think, really depends on what happens after that disruption, the incident that we call disruption, like in detective fictions, But in my film, I think the role of disruption is really, really different, because it plays another role. It plays, as I said, as a twist in some part of the story without leaving any trace. But why? I mean, should we consider such a bringing in such twist in our film? I think when we talk about some specific subject matter like Middle East and oil, this really makes you think of some incoherency because of their nature. And, Middle East acts like an, amorphous creature, is like, with those many hands and legs, and, it's so unpredictable. And it's, you're not certain about anything, and you are waiting for the worst to come, and the worst hasn't come yet. So that's why I think that kind of incoherency and the mysterious way of telling things is, leading you to make such a, to have such narrative structure. And there are so many plot holes that coming from the narrative of Middle East. That's why I chose, to use that kind of mystery inside my, narrative. And also, I think oil itself, induces some sort of, structural irresolution. If I want to use Nick Land's term, he describes the labyrinth. Yeah, labyrinth structure as a, kind of irresolutional structure. So this induces that kind of, structure to the narrative. And because of its dual property, when you think of the oil, it lubricates the narrative. At the same time, it intoxicates everything, and it acts as an outsider that is, lurks in your narrative and comes up to the surface and, intoxicate everything, and has this kind of chaotic presence with itself. And whenever you think that a conclusion might, seem, to come into view, it moves on to a new gesture and, kind of changed your line of thought.
Yeah, that's
That's
truth.
why it's so incoherent, I think. And
you don't know where like the evil's coming from. It's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah,
It could be coming from
know,
anywhere.
really.
Like oil is such a monster.
Anywhere.
I'm gonna get a T-shirt that says "Oil is a monster." That's so awesome. We have another
source from
question.
the ground, but like also unattainable in a way.
It's coming from the ground and it's unattainable. Yeah. It's like so deep. There's a question for Lucia, which is, can you speak about why you chose the 3 featured landscapes and their sequencing?
Yeah, so the first sequence is in Las Vegas, and I chose this location originally because I worked in close proximity to Bourbon Street in the French Quarter for a number of years.
Yeah.
And I
just miss it there. I just missed that part of the world. Okay, I'll be okay.
But I originally filmed a different video that I never released, actually, that was shot on Bourbon Street with a kind of similar premise where I got drunk off a daiquiri and I had my friend just like follow me around and interact with the street. And then, I wanted to make like kind of a more grandiose version of that. So I thought the Vegas Strip is kind of like a giant version of Bourbon Street.
That's so
but
true.
It's also,
my God, that's so true.
Yeah, but it's also this like desolate capitalist utopia in the middle of the desert. And it's like such a easy representation of American excess. And so I chose it for that reason, and trying to imagine my role in that moment as like a noise musician Vegas showgirl. My own interpretation of that. And then for the next scene that was shot in the Chisos Mountains of Big Bend National Park, it's like right on the border of Texas and Mexico. My initial desire to film there was to just have like an epic canyon in the background. And this also has to do with the title, which is the bottom, which refers to a few different things, but but it's also a valley, like a physical valley between canyons. And so I wanted that, that kind of like empty space that is epic behind me, kind of like facing the sublime, like human, in the backdrop of nature. And, but then also things I learned about the space by going there were that, it's so close to the border and it's like this ambiguous space between Mexico and the US. And it's also part of the desert range, the Sonora Desert, where a lot of people cross over into the US. And so it's this like very beautiful landscape that also has this like treacherous darkness to it. Because it's a physical border created by the landscape and not like a built wall by humans. But yeah, these weren't intentions in when making the film, but they're things I learned about the space as I was doing it. The third location, I filmed on Lake Pontchartrain in New Orleans. I wanted to film this in the middle of the ocean, but I did what was in my means. And so Lake Pontchartrain is big enough that it looks like it doesn't end and that it is an ocean. And I like that, it's kind of like a pathetic version of the ocean, but it's also very pretty, and, especially around sunset when we filmed it. Saw an alligator in the water while I was filming. It was pretty amazing. It didn't come near us though. And my original vision was to be in a boat and to just be kind of lost at sea kind of imagery, just like very alone. But then I found this rubber ducky at a store and I was like, I should make this like a little bit more funny or like campy. So that's where I went with that. The sequence is, I don't know. I didn't plan the sequence originally, and it just kind of flowed in the editing process, which is my favorite part of making a film because I usually don't work with storyboard.
I don't storyboard either, but it's good
assembled
to have
in
those
the
instincts.
editing. Totally makes it fun. But that's. It's a long one.
That is amazing. That is amazing. And oh my goodness, we've got a lot of questions. It's not from my mom, which is like a surprise because I'm like waiting for my mom to be like, I want to see like all the questions.
Actually, me too. I'm waiting for my mom as well.
I know, like our mothers have to like join in at a certain point. But this is for Susan, and it says, there's a sense of the untouched land and nature and the stained sheets and oil in the film's visual landscapes and images. Can you speak about this tension?
Yeah.
That's cool. These are good questions.
Yeah. I mean, there's always this kind of tension between untouched and, I think they all come from a hesitation in not knowing what to do. I mean, all this tension, all these things are coming from a hesitation, from not knowing what to do with this brand new body, So, I mean, as Amanda said, it's very unknown. I mean, it's something unusual. Therefore, there's always this tension between fear. There's always this tension between, different layers of things because of not knowing what to do, not accepting the reality. There's some sort of, manipulated reality that kinds of create that kind of tension, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's so
true.
Entering
that territory.
Mm-hmm. That's so beautiful. were you thinking about that as you were shooting, and with your cinematographer? Do you feel like you guys had that sort of sense of the theme and what you were doing whilst you were doing it? Like, you knew what it was already, or were you finding that out while you were shooting it?
I think in my case that we really decided on so many things on the
beforehand,
set. And yeah, and but also in editing.
So
I remember
there was a discovery in the editing room. That's awesome.
Exactly, because the structure I chose for editing, I think my producer, one of my producers, he's also a filmmaker, and he really kind of advised me not to choose this kind of incoherent structure, because he always was telling me that you will confuse your audience, and
the audience is smart, though.
Yeah, and I was telling him that, yeah, they are really smart, and also I deliberately want to have that kind of structure because of the nature of the Middle East.
You're like, that's the whole point,
as I told you.
Yeah,
that's
like,
the whole point of it.
The rest of my life.
Yeah,
so welcome.
And it was really interesting, because when I was writing the script, I had this term in my mind, the ancient enemy. I don't know if you've heard of that, from the book Phantom. The Phantoms, called written by Dean Koontz, I think.
Wow. That's so cool. The ancient enemy. That's awesome.
Yeah, this word was. This book is about this guy who's a paleontologist. A renegade paleontologist who is also a tabloid writer, and researching on this unnamed being, which is responsible for the disappearance of so many people in a village in Colorado, I think. And that unnamed being actually resembles oil,
Right.
Sure. Yeah, and they say that it is oil. In the book.
So intense.
But that term was always in my mind, and I was thinking, what if I could create a narrative, which has, what if I could create an enemy for my narrative? Like it's like in getting the autoimmune disease, when your body is mistakenly
attacking itself.
Exactly. So how can I attack? Exactly. How can I attack my narrative with its own content? So that's how I thought. Okay, if I write about Middle East, I'm sure this, there will be so many plot holes, and also. There's another thing that really impacted. Had a really great impact on me. I think was the movie The Big Sleep by Howard Hawks.
Oh my God! Yes, that's like why we're all here. Like why we all get out of bed. Actually, is the Howard Hawks movie. The Big Sleep, please.
It was very confusing. Actually,
it's like completely inspiring on that level. Yeah.
Exactly. So cool. It's confusing, and there are so many unsolved things, but it's really good because it always gives you this potential that you think that there's this alien presence everywhere, and you don't know the cause of so many things. And there's a murder of a driver. Even that Raymond Chandler, the writer of the book, he's asked to, how this murder happened, how this driver has been killed. He says, I don't know. So you shouldn't have resolve everything in your movie.
Please, it's not like math. Yeah. We're not like in chemistry class doing our formulas.
Exactly.
This is art.
That's why I told my producer, they're so smart, and you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, the audience, like a 2-year-old is smarter than we give them credit for. So it's like, our grandfather who needs to see the film and needs it to be something that is left open for him to interpret on his deathbed. Also, I feel like we've been talking for, I guess, an hour, which is crazy because it feels like 5 minutes. And also, there's another, if you guys can go for a little bit longer, there's another question, if that's cool with y'all.
Yeah.
Because I could do this all day. But there was a question that was about like the mother-daughter relationship in your movie, Susan, if you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit strange because there's that kind of, I mean, they seem so indifferent toward each other. And oil is there, such a vital substance, and it's just there to solve their, you know, some small family issues. Not, maybe they're not small. I mean, it's there just to solve their relationship, I think. And I mean, with using, I mean, oil, she wants to help her daughter to, leave the country, but their attitude toward each other, they seem very cold, I think, and they act so passively.
Yes, it's like the opposite relationship that I have with my mother, which is so warm and sweet. But it's really interesting that there's that film Orange or August in Osage County. It's based on a play, and Meryl Streep played this very terrible mother in it. And when she was interviewed about it, they asked her, saying, "Why would you play a mother who's so cold when you're such a warm mother?" And she said, "Well, I have friends who have mothers who were cold, and they had a really difficult life because they had cold mothers." And I was like, oh my God, like, it's so deep. So it's important to show all aspects of all different kinds of relationships. And it's profound that you did that in Leakage. It's really important, I think. There's also a question for Meryl. Speaking of Meryl Streep, our own Meryl Streep that we have here with us, the young Meryl Streep, Meryl in the 70s, except you're much cuter than her and much more beautiful. But there's a question for you saying, can you give yours a review of the panel discussion, Reclamation and Resilience, because that's the one coming up, which we're excited about, and I'm watching it. So
yes, it's coming up on Tuesday. There's going to be 2 filmmakers that we'll be speaking with from the section Rituals of Reclamation. So they have 2 short films. One is Patricia Montoya, who's filmed When La Rumorosa Quiets. It's from Mexico, and kind of looks at what happens when women speak up against sexual assault and violence. And then Gian Hallisey's film Mother, Daughter, Sister, which is a documentary shot in
Myanmar,
in refugee camps of women from Myanmar who have fled the Burmese military and are victims of state-sponsored violence. And their ways of kind of coming together to collectively heal and be activists against state-censored violence. It's like rape as a war tactic, basically. And we'll be joined with 2 specialists from LaFASA, Louisiana Foundation Against Sexual Assault, and the International Rescue Committee. So that deals with immigrants and refugees coming from other places, to kind of speak about these things from a Louisiana perspective, a US perspective, and draw those correlations. So that'll be Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Time. We would love to see you there.
This is so vital, you guys. This work is so important, and everyone is doing such a great job. Thank you guys so much for being part of this. It means the world to me that we can sit together and talk about these ideas. It's so important.
I wish we could do this all day.
I know. It's so great.
Love it. Can you guys come to my house and just move in?
Be there in a few months.
Okay. It's also
I will
wonderful.
definitely come.
Yes, that's it. We're bonded for life, and it's like for real. It's so true. And we love New Orleans too, and we're sending so much love out there.
Thank you everyone for showing up.
All the way. Thanks.
Cinema heart. I love the cinema heart.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Be well, everybody.
I love you all. I wish I could.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.